Read in propria persona in law. In, there's several words, in propria persona.
In propria persona. In one's own person.
In one's own proper person.
In one's own proper person.
So that's almost redundant, isn't it? One's is possessive, isn't it?
Right.
Proper is kind of possessive, isn't it? With proper person.
Right.
In one's own. So one's
own.
Possessive, own possessive. You see?
Right.
In one's own proper person. In layman's term, that would be talking about being yourself, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Now continue to read that again, and then read it in context, and then analyze it. In propria persona means
In propria persona means
to be in one's own proper person.
In one's own proper person. It is a rule in pleading that pleas to the jurisdiction of the court must be pled in proper persona, because if pleaded by attorney, they admit the jurisdiction, as the attorney is an officer of the court.
Now stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so what happens if a person's talking about a state, talking about their rights and everything, and they're not in their proper person? The barristers have jurisdiction, don't they? And if you hire one, they have jurisdiction, don't they? So they have your birthright. So if you're not in your proper person, you have no right of a state, do you? How do you fix it? All over the world it's called nationalization. Now see the status, see how they all go together? But if one's not aware of that and someone doesn't teach you, it never dawns on you that your status is dead when you're out in society, does it? Because it's just not in the conversation, is it?
The second you hire a lawyer, you're telling everyone else that you
just gave him your birthright.
That you're not competent in law,
exactly.
And that you need someone else to speak for you. So all these people who are wondering how the system doesn't work for them and why black people never get...
Now
the second you hire a lawyer is the second that they understand that you don't know anything about the law, so of course they're going to drag you through the law.
And rob you.
Of everything that you have.
Exactly.
And kidnap you and hold you ransom.
And he's an officer of court. First, his obligations to the court, isn't it clear right there? Huh? And the court has jurisdiction already. You see the point? So if your status is dead, your estate is dead, isn't it?
Which goes back to the question, so how do people go about correcting their status?
Now there's where nationalization is. I took you through that to come right back to the basis. Meaning that if you understand what we just went through, the answer becomes obvious, but you got to tell people because they still don't get it. It's called nationalization. That's the official process of reclaiming your right of self so that you're capable of claiming your estate. And you can't make it up. You really got to be yourself.
Right.
So who are you? Now you understand George Washington's letter? It's the Moroccan Empire. What happens if you claim to be black, green, and purple? You've given up your claim of estate. See why we got to put all those component parts together to clean these people's minds so it becomes obvious? And we know, and it still ain't obvious to them. Yet it's obvious.
How do they nationalize?
Exactly. You nationalize by making a what? An official what's called declaratory statement in your proper person in organized body politics. This is why Girardi set up the Moorish Science Temple of America, so this can be done officially. Although it is a birthright, you're recognized in your connection with organized government, your national status. Therefore, you got to know what nationality is. You got to be organized, because no man's an island. The sovereignty of the people is recognized through your nation. Not that you're not recognized as a single unit. You are. But then you must know the law, mustn't you?
Right.
Now you see why the organized body politic and why Girardi registered the Moorish Science Temple as a civic group. As a civic organization, look up in the microfilm, look up in the records. Moorish Temple of Science was registered as a civic organization in 1925. It's documented. Now you see why the COINTELPRO operators keep telling the people it's only a religious organization to divert them from the fact that it's a civic organization. But until people look at the record, they will believe people just because they're saying things, because they get caught up in their biases of who they like, who they don't like. And remember, the people, the shills only get away with this because they know the people don't have
references.
exactly, and they're not being taught.
So you say that I need to make a declaration.
Yes, but you need to know the history, because you don't just make a declaration because somebody says so.
Right.
This is why we went through the scenarios. So once you understand and you recognize any organization that you're dealing with that's not having this at its foundation, you know it's a diversion. Because this is universal international law. This is an obligation.
It is an obligation, but it's very hard information for most people to find, especially people who are just now coming into knowledge.
Now let's say this again, in support of what you're saying right now. Noble Ali set up the Old Canaanite Temple and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which is known as the Moorish Temple of Science. And then it adopted in 1928 as its corporate name, the Moorish Science Temple of America. And he said, our press is the most powerful weapon in the hand of our group today. And he also said, what, if you don't do anything else to declare your nationality, you understand the status issue. And so you have a political platform, a civic platform that was set up for this to be done. However, the proper PR has not been done to make the people know this, has it?
No.
So now that's called the COINTELPRO infiltration stuff, isn't it? Isn't it? However, it's still, the responsibility still exists. It didn't go nowhere. And the people are still suffering for a lack of knowledge, aren't they? So as we're telling you, and you already know, but just act like you don't know, it is your job to tell someone else and family members, and you don't try to convince them. You give them documents so they can't get caught up in saying it's your belief. It's documented facts, and they're obligated. They don't know that they're obligated. They think it's a belief. As long as they think it's a belief, it's dismissible. But what we're showing is a lot of the injury is based on their dead status, that they don't know is dead status. And if you tell them without showing them documents, they think it's your opinion because the black leaders are saying that. They don't know that the black leaders are working for the European under COINTELPRO operations. Do you know, again, and like I said, the more and more you show this information, what you must do becomes obvious. What you recognize is that you need organized bodies to do it.
Right.
Now, and so now you understand why the Moorish Science Temples have divine constitution and bylaws, and why the Grand Sheik and Assistant Grand Sheik are put in power to make law. See, we're talking the law. And then every temple must have a school. Now, we're not going to argue about whether they do or not. That will be self-evident. But when you see these component parts missing, I don't have to tell you what's happening done. Once you have the information, you have the information necessary to do what? Organize even yourself. When you have the component parts. Now you understand why the different temples in the different regions, why the Jurali set them up like that.
I just feel that most of this information isn't out there for a lot of people, or easy for them to find. Like, I found that Sister Standing on Law really helped me understand a lot of the things that were going on. So I printed out the entire course, and I've been studying and listening to myself.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people in the world out there who don't have access or don't know where exactly to find this information,
now,
or how to prepare themselves.
Let's keep this very simple. Let's keep this very simple. We're in the studio with Thano at the House of Tunes, right?
Yep.
Right?
Love it.
You have the information, right?
Yes.
And just like it's printed off for you, it can be duplicated, can it?
Yes.
Now, collectively as a people, don't we have a lot of organizations, church groups, a whole bunch of organizations that we fund, donate to, and do a whole bunch of stuff to?
Yep.
That don't fix a damn thing? And actually keep costing fiat and don't fix, but they address some of these things verbally with no remedy. Here's a remedy, right? So even if you're busy, and even though we all have burdens trying to survive under this debt slavery that the European has us under United States corporation company operatives pretending to be government. We're not so distooled, meaning that we're not so lacking in tools that we cannot reach out and get some things done that can be transferred to others, can be given to them as a gift.
As in most of the binders with the case laws in them to my friends. Matt knows I can.
Yes, exactly. And they can do and should do the same thing. Meaning that, and it's back to the point that I'm not knocking anyone. Our people will spend, you know, a nice little hunk of change for knockoff Gucci bags.
Yes.
Knockoff Gucci shoes and stuff like that, and somebody else's hair and stuff like that, and would not spend 5 notes to have that printed up.
It was funny because someone mentioned that to me today. They said, oh, you should sell that information. I need that information in my car. I got pulled over a couple weeks ago. And I said, it's funny because if I was to sell it for the $88 that a normal speeding ticket would be, or $136 that a normal speeding ticket would be,
upset.
People wouldn't buy it.
Exactly.
I could save them on 10 to 15
Exactly.
$88 to $100 speeding tickets.
Exactly. And what? It's established already. It's the established law, and most of them will sit around talking about having black meetings, trying to figure out what to do to deal with this racism. You see where the problem is, and that's where they're directed. And you know by now it's not the argument, it's birthright.
Right.
And so it's easy to correct it, isn't it? Just share the information. Now, the people appear not to want it. So Obama he put to an expose that the American Constitution come from Muslim law, so they don't have to figure. Now he's the highest officer in the administration of this estate, and if they don't accept what we've been telling them, now he's telling them. Now the Pope is telling them. Now pull up on your phone Pope Francis' letter to Obama. I know you're already familiar with it, right? Civil orders. And take this in consideration when the people are distracted by their so-called important black leader guys in the communities.
While she looking that up, another question, after the name correction, what would be the correct way to go about starting your own business?
Estate, put their stuff in the state. You being your proper person, at least then you can start own property. This is why the estate. Now, the question is valid, however, this is the point. Once one understands these principles, the question is already answered. It's almost like if you're telling somebody 2 and 2 is 4 and they agree to 2 and 2 is 4, then they ask you, what about if you get 3 and 3? Which means they don't understand the concept yet. And it's fine, but that's why we must continue to what? Purge. Because the concept is what we're getting across. It means it's self-evident. Do you understand? But the fact that we got to continue to keep on giving examples is not wrong, because some people just don't get it. But it should be self-evident. Now, and until it's self-evident, now look at this, what happens. What happens when our people don't appear to be able to comprehend self-evident? What do the administrators tell them to do? Shut up and go get a lawyer. Since you can't present yourself, you apparently have the mentality of a child or minor and must be represented or represented by another man. Then they put a barrister on them, and the barrister robs them. It's called barratry. And this is where we have to start taking responsibility to start thinking. Meaning, after you've been shown this evidence, most of this stuff becomes obvious. That's not a rejection, mind you, but that is an urgence and a declaratory encouragement to take responsibility to think, because some of these questions should be answered already. It's not being rejected, but you need to think because you've been given the answer. Because until it becomes your own, meaning if it's mine and we got to keep answering these questions in the studio, not that we shouldn't answer it. When you get in the ring, when you get on the ring of life, they'll punch you in your head. They ain't gonna be drawing new punches, which is why we're giving this information. And the reason why, another thing that must be looked at, we have a limited time when we're doing this, these little lectures or interviews. And so we're giving you references and documents so you can see for yourself. And it becomes absolutely obvious. Read some of this material using the references that we've given you, say like House Joint Resolution 192, Post Letter to Obama, coup d'etat, the Congress adjourning Senate deal, May the 10th of 61, the Act of Congress 1871, and make up your own questions and then answer them. And this stuff, it becomes so obvious where we're wanting that you will recognize that your answers, your questions have actually been answered over and over again tonight on multiple levels.
And the last time you was here, you said you wanted to go over non-proton.
Non-proton, that means now for them. And I don't, do you have that document?
Which is?
Where from the city chambers of Philadelphia, where they did the non-proton.
No, I had the indicative.
I do apologize, because I don't have that with me.
Declarations of rights.
But I have that in, you don't have the non-proton, because we have it in our book. You know the book that we give everybody with the Great Seal papers. I'll make sure you get the Great Seal papers too.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the non-proton is where from the city chambers of Philadelphia, because they took the birthright here, it was a call, a public call, a public notice that was given out, and this was after they did the MOVE bombing, and they did a public notice for these people. That's a legal term for now, for then. That means for now, for then, for these people, all people, blacks, colored, Negroes, and or niggers, free, nationality, name, definitely Moorish American. In other words, they're telling the people to declare their nationality. That's what the non-proton document is. Came from City Hall chambers. Now, it's almost like, even though we know that it's limited comparatively, there's so much documentation that hasn't been burned or suppressed that an imbecile can recognize that they're on call to declare their nationality. This includes the rights of indigenous people that Obama just signed recently. That includes Treaty Enforcement 93 under the Clinton administration. That includes Declaration Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948. That includes Rights of a Child 1959. I mean, it's like redundant. It's absolutely redundant. And one piece of information as we give you would lead you to these other documents, and of course this stuff we've been given to people over years. So it's accumulated information that almost everybody has that's been dealing with us. And they're distracted by these black leader shills that Southern Christian law firm guys keep on sending out here and paying their fees to keep on attacking the Moors and muddying the water. And the people keep following after them instead of studying the stuff that we're showing them, thinking that it's a belief. Do you understand? And we're talking documents, we're not talking about opinions. And they got these black guys creating all these debate videos arguing issues that aren't even arguable. And they follow them with precision like they do soap operas. And they won't, for some strange reason, it's almost like boats are considered Negro taboo. As a matter of fact, they'll read 2 lines and start filling the rest in with their beliefs. Meanwhile, they don't know that Europeans are trying to kill them off.
You sure?
Well, he's sure. And then they're trying to stop people who have the knowledge from teaching them.
Right.
Because it will absolutely cause institutions to collapse because they're built on fraud.
They don't want the children of Kareem.
Tell me about it.
They don't want the next generation of people.
But they love the children, right? Yeah.
Yes. So speaking of the women and children, those are my only real questions. My only real concern, the mom's son. So for these women who are having children, we talked about birth certificates versus live record of birth, and even past that, declaring your nationality. I've spoken with you about this before, and I remember you mentioning something about the Attorney General. Who do we put on
The
those?
Attorney
Who are we
General
telling
is the comptroller, C-O-M-P, of alien properties. Now this goes with the role of the executor. Executor. Now the executor is the collector for the resources, revenues, and like the treasury for the Pope to Rome and the Jesuit order. He would be equal in past tense to Thomas de Torquemada. And so the organizational equal to that now would be the Internal Revenue Service. And for every corporate state of jurisdiction, you know, these are really our estates in corporate entity.
Right.
The Attorney General would be controlling the right of property. That's the transfer house.
So if I was to have a child, how would I go about nationalizing my child?
The same way you would in the temple. And now, this is key. See, because I don't want anybody to get confused. Because of the unfortunate situation we have with the infiltration in the 30s, just before the prophet was assassinated, etc. These things should have been taught, and they have not been. By necessity, some other Moors with more genius citizens, as you might call them, set up other organizations to get these things carried out and register them. That was done by CMB and others who were more active. And people like myself will set up the round table, etc., different organizations, and set up protocols for these things to be done that the traders were blocking.
Right.
But because people get caught up in favoritisms, we start showing them laws so they wouldn't think we're trying to compete.
Right.
We're trying to liberate them. And so the record of live birth distinguished from a certificate. That's why they have to learn law, because a certificate is a bond. It's essentially an instrument of sale. So they got to know language. And you see where all these component parts come in? And then it must actually be themselves. So it must be a member of the Moorish nation. Can't make up some Blackadonia stuff and then put a red and green and black flag and then thinking that that stands in law in Pan-Africa, if you get the whole point. Because the obligation exists before you were born. You must come back on the platform. You have the right of a state if you don't come back on the platform. You can't make up something. But they don't know that because they've been told other than that. See, in other words, like this, you can't make up a mom and then say that you have a right to a state. You must acknowledge the original mother. Do you understand? And our people got caught up in this Ebonics thing that they can make up Pan-African nation stuff and just make stuff up and then have claim of right to the estate. But they don't know law, and so they don't know that. You know what I mean? And their black leaders keep on convincing them they can make stuff up and just use a green and black flag or make anything that looks Afrocentric and have standing, and it doesn't. And of course, if you tell them that, they think that you're attacking their black organization when you're actually trying to tell them to respect the law, to respect your honor of your mothers and fathers. It already exists. If you deny it, you've denied your estate. But again, this is why it's important for people to know the history, because they don't know they have an estate.
Right.
And you notice how we're going in circles?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it goes back to if you, and this is where Drawley said, if you can't convince them and show them that they're not Negro, black, and colored, there's no need to tell them anything else.
Anymore, right.
And what is it, the problem that we have in certain situations is not a problem, it's the dynamics of communication. It's getting our people to respect the foundation and stop trying to get the prize before acknowledging the foundation, because the foundation must be there before the building is erected. These are fundamental rules. And this is again also, even though we have difficulty, that by protocols, even when you're dealing with peripheral organization or people dealing on advanced degrees, we send them to the Moorish Science Temple of America, get their foundation. Hopefully, that the Grand Sheiks and Sheikas in the Moorish Science Temple will reinstitute their obligation to teach constitutional principles and to bring the people back in the constitutional fold of government. But unfortunately, we know that doesn't always happen. And so we have to get the people to a certain level of consciousness where they themselves will start taking that responsibility upon themselves, but not abandon the institution, which of course creates problems too. So it's also admitting the damage and the flaws, but giving people enough knowledge where they can use their knowledge to start fixing this thing. You're out just for a minute, so I'm really talking about fundamental infiltration. And it gets uncomfortable because people, you know, don't want to talk about the great sellout. You know?
Somebody had a question that was kind of similar to what it was saying. This is confusing on the Moorish Temple of America site.
I know.
It says that Moors are supposed to have driver's license, and how people began refusing simply because of the Euro-American sovereign citizens movement. So are there different levels to it?
Yes. Now, answer to that, go ahead, tell them what you read.
This is confusing on the Moorish Temple.
It is confusing, but it's not. It is, but it isn't. Do you see what I'm saying? Why I had you read the documents?
Yes.
Now read the question again, because you went out just for a minute. And remember you went over the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Now, this is it. I want you to read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations. Do you have that available? As a matter of fact, I'm going to read it and then I will answer your question.
To help a lot of people, I also found rbbaypublications.com to be a very helpful website for everything that I needed, all the questions. That's also where you find the Sister Standing on Law classes that I was referring to, and all of the information I got about the Supreme Court case laws as far as traveling and the things that are going on amongst our people right now.
Now, were they listening from the beginning when we went over the different United States and the theft of the birthright? Now, the conversion of the right into a crime and a privilege was done with that conversions of the United States. Now, I'm going to read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations. Please don't hesitate to interject and to look at what's obvious here, all right?